just to kind of give you a background, we've got about 15 seminars this season that we're going to be hosting. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to touch every aspect of the golf business. So, from an instruction side, from a club operations side, from technology. Today, we obviously have Jeff Voorheis and Jonathan Gold on staffing and the challenges that we're seeing during these last 2 years with the pandemic. So each of the seminars is designed to touch somebody in the section. If you have any ideas or things that you would like to see, please contact Corey, myself, or Jeff or Caitlin at the section office, and would be happy to try to do that. I think you're going to enjoy today because we felt that the staffing that all of you are facing at this time is very serious. We have an untold amount of assistant positions, first assistant positions, like I've never seen before here in a Met section. So, Jeff and Jonathan sit in our board meetings, and we're always discussing this behind the scenes, what we can do. And we feel like they've come up with some, not necessarily solutions, but alternatives. I think this is a changing landscape for us. We have to continually think outside the box. We have to do things like we've never done before. You might be employing people on a part-time basis more so than you have in the past. And Jonathan works very closely with a number of consultants in the industry. And without further ado, we're going to turn it over to Jeff and let him kick it off this morning. And again, enjoy. And we want this to be interactive. So we're going to have a queue up there. So if you have questions, Caitlin's going to put a queue up, so put your questions there. And if you have feedback you want to share, please let us know, because some of you might have better solutions than we've thought of. And that's what we're here for, to help each other. Okay. So Jeff.
Thanks, John. And just want to start out by recognizing Corey Muller and John Hobbins and the whole education committee. If you can't tell from the way that John speaks about these events, John's very passionate and has done an unbelievable job in the way that he describes, wanting to sort of touch on all the things that impact us, not necessarily just swing and instruction, but all things that are relevant. And of course, nothing maybe more important and relevant to us than these issues that we're having with workforce development, recruiting employees, and so on. So thank you, John, and the committee. Also just want to mention Jonathan Gold, who I think everyone probably knows. Jonathan is the PGA of America career consultant lead for the Northeast. I think it probably doesn't need that introduction, but thanks, Jonathan, and you'll hear from him in just a few minutes. And Tyler Bloom, who I'm not sure if he's made it to the call yet, but Tyler's name may be familiar to some. He's gotten more involved with the PGA of America and with the section. Tyler comes from an agronomy background, but has really become a specialist in workforce development. And again, though he comes from a golf course superintendent background, I think the concepts and the things that he's done to foster, recruiting, developing, and maintaining staff are certainly relevant to what we're doing. So, Tyler, if you're here, we'd love for you to say hello. But if not, hopefully we'll hear from you a little bit later on. As John mentioned, today's discussion was titled, I think it was called Staffing Challenges and Possible Solutions in 2022. That title may or may not have been properly crafted. I think overall, and John said it, I think the idea is that we can't just think of this as how do we find people anymore. We have to really think bigger picture and sort of this overall process of, as I've said a few times already, and I'll probably say again, recruit, develop, and retain your staff. So, and the other thing I want to say before we get going is, and I was thinking about it this morning, it may be analogous to your students that come in for a golf lesson. Everybody's comes in looking for, the magic lesson or the magic pill. And unfortunately, if that's what you came for this morning, we'll gladly refund your entry fee. We don't have it yet. I certainly wish that we did. But again, I think what today's about is these more big picture conversations. You know, some of our thoughts and what Jonathan and myself have encountered sort of in the process of speaking to a lot of you. Hopefully, you know, by virtue of the number of people that signed up, it's apparent to you that you're not alone. You know, this is impacting everybody. And also in saying that, you know, as John Hobbins said, you know, we would like today to be interactive. We encourage, you know, there is a presentation that we're going to follow here, but we encourage your questions, comments, and maybe most importantly, best practices, you know. So if something comes up where you feel like something you've done or experienced can help the group, please stop us and feel free to contribute. Again, I think just in setting up the presentation here, first of all, I would say that, you know, again, maybe this is fairly obvious and apparent, but this current employment situation that we find ourselves in is like one we've never experienced. Essentially, it's the reverse of what most of us have known for our entire careers in the golf business, where whether it's assistant professionals or even just filling in those gaps for outside operations and et cetera, I would use the word competitive. You know, the number of resumes that you would receive each time you posted something. You never had to post outside of the Met PGA's sort of closed loop because you're always able to find good quality people. You know, all that has been reversed. You know, that supply demand, you know, chart is different again than what we've ever seen. So we're kind of forced to rethink the entire process and do things differently than we've ever done. Again, I think the idea of, as I said, recruitment, development, and then retention, I think that those are all going to be really germane to today's conversation. And I think they'll be thematic, and you'll see sort of the presentation sort of follow through those concepts and some ideas relating to all that. Again, want to recognize that, you know, there's probably more here than just, hey, how do I find somebody, right? For some of us, we might say, hey, I have the budget, you know, my club, I've got the budget, I'm ready, I've got, you know, golf operations dollars to spend. I simply can't find the people. There may be others on this call who feel like in order for them to hire better or retain the people that they currently have, they need to prove to their club that they can expand their budget. And so, unfortunately, you know, depending on who you are, depending on what your situation is, this may not every, you know, portion of today's conversation may not speak directly to your situation. But again, I feel like this overall, a lot of these concepts are they sort of all work in unison with one another, and I think, you know, speak to each other. So, you know, I guess what I'm saying is maybe bear with us a little bit. This isn't necessarily just how to find people, but it's sort of a, you know, maybe broken into some parts. State of the union, you know, in golf, maybe some thoughts on what we should be paying people. And chances are that in a lot of cases, that's a little low. Then there'll be some things about, you know, how do we develop and retain the people that we have? And again, I think you'll see that'll be the general flow of the conversation. So I just wanted to kind of set up the talk before we got into the slides. But Jonathan, if you want to go ahead and yeah, and I see, you know, actually, before we do that, I see Tyler is here now. So Tyler, as Jonathan prepares to put the slide deck up, do you want to just say hello and introduce yourself?
Yeah. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Tyler Bloom. I think probably Jonathan and Jeff gave a little bit of introduction, but I think we've got to know each other a little bit last month, and just excited to be here to talk about labor.
Great.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Tyler, for being here. It's great to see everyone. Happy New Year to all of you. I know it feels like we've talked a bunch over these past few months because we're all feeling it. We're all feeling the challenges with staffing, the employment, and we're all living through this together. I've had the opportunity to meet Tyler actually over a year ago as Tyler was starting his business of exactly this, of recruiting and mentoring and developing staff and staffing models for facilities to retain and recruit talent. And it's been a great relationship. Tyler is fantastic and certainly a leader in the industry here. So I know we're very much looking forward to hearing from him as well and some of his ideas and what he's seen as success. I just want to leave with a couple of things. And we're going through this together, but I just want you to know that it's not all doom and gloom, right? We kind of have to look at this from another lens. If I were to say that, or I was asked, is PGA professional in a good place right now? I'd say absolutely. The PGA professional is in more demand than ever before. Compensation and wages are exploding, not only for head professionals, but for everyone, for teaching professionals, director of instruction, assistant professionals. Wages and salary are actually exceeding what is inflationary numbers and cost of living. And that's just because you are in great demand. We have a 0% unemployment, right? This situation could be a lot different. We could be going through a staffing crisis and have a large amount of unemployment because of the pandemic. But on the other side, we're at 0, right? We're in high demand. And for the case of those that are trying to hire employees, you understand that the employee has all the leverage in the world. And today is really about how to figure out what will take to get them to join your team so you are of better value to your facility. And then Jeff, I just wanted to toss it back to you because I know that you do you have a lot of conversations with club presidents, owners of golf courses, employers. And it's funny now how our conversations have shifted in the past 2 years. And, what are some of their priorities when they're looking to hire, a senior level staff?
Yeah, sure, John. Especially, we've been through, I believe we're up to 12 either head golf professional or director of golf transitions since, let's call it the summer of 2021, which, as most people on the call know, that's at least 4 or 5 times what we're used to seeing in 1 year. So there was a lot of that going on. And to your point, at least a few of those new hires, the priority of a couple of the committees was, number one, what are their skills? Can they manage and run our golf operation? And kind of 1A was talent acquisition. What's their network like? Part of the interview process itself was, what's your staffing plan? And so I think it's evident to the employers that this is an issue as well. And I think the ability to, as you've said, and John Hobbins said, even in kicking off the program, like we really need to rethink and I hate to say be less casual. We've just been in a fortunate position that this hasn't been something that we've had to, sort of sharpen up in the war chest over the years as one of the skills, because it just came easily. And now I think this is something where we may be a little bit behind, and it's something that has to be, as I said, sort of really an important piece of that of the war in the war chest.
Yeah, great point, Jeff. We see it pretty much every conversation, and we see those that are ultimately getting the positions are ones that are able to explain their network of other professionals and how they will recruit and retain talent for the club. It's certainly 1A. It certainly could be the number 1 priority as of next year if this continues. But again, it is positive. Golf courses and clubs and facilities have more cash on hand than ever. Everyone's experiencing a boom in the industry. It's very evident by all the renovations that are going on the club side, whether it's on the golf course, whether it's the clubhouse, whether it's indoor teaching facilities. There is cash available. And it's really our job, or try to influence, to have some of that dedicated towards payroll and staffing resources. So with that said, we'll kind of go through what is the current state of the landscape. And then again, as John and Jeff mentioned, if you have any questions, please feel free. Please put it in the chat, or if you want to have a question to have a conversation interrupt, please do so at any time. So that said, obviously everyone's hiring. Jeff, if you can hear me, I want to ask you a question. As far as the Met PGA Job Board, right? It's something that has been up there for 20 plus years. The number of jobs on there now, how does it relate to years past? And then I know that you send out recurring emails to those that have posted on the job board to ask if they've made the hire, and how does that translate from this year to maybe 5 years ago?
Yeah, as you might imagine, and people can probably anticipate, the answer to that question is the last 2 years, those numbers have been significantly higher than I can ever remember them being. I think at the end, and it's not an absolute science, certainly some people will fill a position and forget to let us know to remove it from the listing. But, I count at the end of last year, I counted 30 positions that were likely to have gone unfilled. There are currently 54 positions. They're not all assistant golf professional, but they're anywhere from first assistant, teaching professional, entry level, outside operations, but 54 positions. And as you mentioned, we periodically will email those who have listed to say, hey, how you doing? Most importantly, hey, if you've filled your position, let us know, because as a service to the rest of the people who are still looking, let's get yours off of there, right? And unfortunately, I would get more responses of people who said, I got 0 hits, as compared to those that said, yes, I've hired. And I'm sure there are a number on this call, and maybe misery loves company a little bit. So there's some comfort in knowing that you're in this good company here. But I'm sure there's plenty of people on this call who have a listing either on the PGA or PGA of America Career Services, or both, who have gotten this many hits on their job. So long answer to your question, Jonathan, but yeah, in my experience, this is, as I said earlier, this is a 180 in terms of what we're accustomed to.
Yep. And one of the first things that you can do if you're seeking, for those on the call, that if you're seeking an assistant or an employee, is keep in constant contact with Jeff and myself, because Jeff, if a position is filled and the person says, hey, we filled someone here, they probably could have had more than one applicant for the position, right? That these are people still looking for a job in the industry. So keeping in close contact with Jeff and the job board is certainly going to be helpful, instead of just kind of letting it live out in space and hoping someone's going to come apply for the position. That's one way that we can certainly help each other. So again, how did we get here? This is the total members of PGA of America. We hear 28,000 all the time, but here's what it is in reality. Not including life members, class F, we have about 18,300 members. It's a lot different than 28,000 that we hear. The issue that we're having right now is with our associates and PGM students. We have 3,400 associates, and total PGM students are 1,274. Those numbers are very close to 50% less than what they were 5 years ago. It is putting a tremendous stress on the industry. It is exactly why we're feeling what we feel right now and seeking out employees or finding staff. And this is our staffing challenges. Even though if we were at the levels we were 5 years ago, probably still would be a little bit thin. The reason why I say that is that we have, we do have resignations, specifically in the assistant roles, even head professional roles. But what was traditionally green grass positions has expanded. A PGA professional wears many, many hats. And now with other opportunities, there is certainly more, they're spread more thin and not only concentrated on the traditional green grass positions. There's a constant elevation now. We see it more than ever from head professionals being pushed and moved into general managers or director of golf and chief operating officer positions. The general management space is incredibly thin, about 10 times more thin than traditional head professionals spaces, and now clubs are looking to PGA professionals and head professionals to move into that role, and they're doing a great job in that space as well. So this is one of the things that is putting a strain on the supply issues of staff. The member demographics is no surprise. The majority of our members are aging out. They're over 45 years old, where the minority is between 21 and 44. So we are seeing those retired baby boomers because of the pandemic are retiring earlier than expected. The pandemic certainly has accelerated that, but that's why we find ourselves where we are today. Now, we live in a very interesting area. Obviously, it's probably the highest, if not one of the highest places to live in the country. With that said, we have to be aware of the stress factors and what it really takes to retain and attract talent to our facilities. There are a lot of job offers. We are living in the current great resignation. There are currently over 10 million jobs open in the country, right? So we are fighting with not only with ourselves in the golf industry, but we're fighting with other opportunities who are increasing their pay. When you look at something here, for those that reside or are trying to attract staff on Long Island and Westchester, it wasn't too long ago that Manhattan always had the highest cost of living in our area. It still does, but Long Island and Westchester certainly are catching up, and this has to do with a lot of movement from the city areas out into the suburban areas. So even I know those that are calling in from the east end of Long Island, you've really experienced a dramatic increase in the cost of living. And I'm sure that you are doing all you can to attract staff, and probably one of the first things you're doing is looking into staff housing, right? That's almost become a necessity from where you are. We obviously have our minimum wage and our poverty line, but our poverty line for hourly wage is getting close to $25 per hour in most of the territories within the section. Now, the 30% of salary needed that goes to rent, we're getting around 6 figures. Again, in the metropolitan area, we know that we spend a little bit more than 30% of our income on our housing needs. Just like San Francisco, it's just part of what we do in our area. But if you want to attract people that want to save and that's important to them, this is where you need to be. And frankly, for those first assistant roles, 2 years ago, we would see that maybe 25% of first assistant roles were in 6 figures. And now at private clubs, that number is certainly exceeding that. So what Jeff was mentioning before, these are some statistics here about our job board and job board postings. We can see that in 2021, 202 jobs were posted on the job board between the Metropolitan and New Jersey sections. And out of those postings, there's an average of 2.4 applicants for each posting. That is down close to 50% from the year before. So we have 50% less applicants per jobs. And the total number of listings has also increased. It's not on here, but that's gone up about 20% year over year. When you look at the total anticipated compensation, we have 52,000 is what's been listed. That's the average of all assistant positions in the area. And I will say for the most part, that has increased and finally starting to catch up, which would be considered competitive wages in the area. We hear this a lot. So how does an assistant role or someone graduating college stack up with other industries? And I mentioned that 52,000 number. It's getting close, but it's not there. Remember, these are people that are probably graduating college, or if they're not graduating college, they've graduated college with a separate degree and are now an associate. So they essentially have their master. They are a professional. They're a Class A. They're professionals at their craft. So how does their starting salary line up with other starting salaries outside of the industry? Again, we're getting close, but I think that if we were on the top here, the 65, 70,000, 75,000, we would start to attract a lot more people within our industry. One thing go ahead.
Sorry, Jonathan. I wanted to jump in here and maybe call on John Hobbins if you don't mind, John. We had a conversation this morning, and you gave a little personal anecdote about your start in the golf business, and I think this slide is a little bit sort of it shoulders on the concept that you were describing of you got into the golf profession because you wanted it, and you were willing to tolerate some of these lacks of differences in pay and things compared to what you might have done otherwise. I don't want to take away your thunder, but if you don't mind, I thought that was a great story.
Yeah, not so much thunder, but lack of good common sense would be more like it, Jeff. And we were talking earlier before we started that I'm in the over 45 category that Jonathan showed there. I'm the aging out population. But when I started in the industry, I started in Florida. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I moved to Florida because back then I could only earn 6 credits a year, which we called them then, the MSR type credits. But for our apprenticeship, which is now the associate's position, if I went to Florida, I could get 36 credits, and you also got 8 for a college degree, which I had. So inside 3 years, I could get my membership, as opposed to Pennsylvania, where it would take me close to 6 years. So I did that. And when I was there, I started out, as the last assistant at a club, and I got paid, my salary. I got lessons, and I had to work an evening job, which I did. I drove cab 5 nights a week so that I could make ends meet. And to me, I had no problem doing it. I was young, I was single, I didn't have, a lot of expenses. And so I would work 2 jobs to stay in the golf industry. But that's not something that I see happening, obviously, today, is people working multiple jobs. You have people like a Kirk Agori who is a club maker, a club fitter, and a teacher. So he works multiple jobs within the industry and shares his time there. But stepping outside the industry for a second job is not something that I see a lot of, if any, today. And so I think that, coupled with, when we were first in the industry, there was no such thing as overtime. It was just, you worked from dark to dark 30, we used to call it. So we were there before, the sun was on horizon, and then we were there after the sun left the horizon. And that was just our normal day. And those are not things that you can deal with today and expect, due to labor laws. And I think the main thing is, for years, we in the golf industry were not competitive with other industries. And there's no way that you can rightfully live on $35,000, $40,000 a year around the metropolitan section. Even if you're sharing household expenses with other professionals, what have you, it's just it doesn't permit that. And so one of the things that we're talking about is, you got to start thinking outside the box. I know in myself, I'm basically involved in the instruction industry portion of golf. And I've had a number of conversations recently with head professionals asking if I had any availability for a day or 2 a week to come in and assist them. And that's never happened before, right? Where you're going to go and hire somebody for a day or 2 a week in order to meet your professional needs. But those are the type of things I think we have to start looking at. And then also how you structure that person's time, when they're with you, what you can expect from them, as far as, what's realistic, what's not. These are conversations that, when I was growing up in the industry, that no one ever had with me, but we certainly need to have them today as we go through the hiring practices. And, we didn't have, our staggered hours were, like I said, before the sun came up and after the sun went down. Well, that's not something that we can get away with today for a number of reasons. There's a certain balance to life that I wasn't aware of when I was a young associate.
John, thanks, John. Yeah, no, thanks, John. And just to kind of bring it back, you used a phrase this morning when we spoke. You said willing to tolerate. Were the words that you used, and it was, you used that in describing sort of yourself. You were willing to tolerate some of these other, having to drive a cab at night or whatever it is that you had to do in order to be in the golf business, because that's how much it meant to you. That's how badly you wanted to be able to stay in golf. And I think, whatever that, generally speaking, I think the candidates for these jobs now, that intrinsic value to them is far less than what it was, than what we've seen historically. So that, and that's why it occurred to me with this slide in particular, because, that intrinsic value is almost like zero these days. They're not willing to tolerate anything less than what they could earn in another industry, what they're worth in another industry, the way that you were, or the way that a lot of us on this call were. So that's why that was my thinking in calling on you there. And again, I love that willing to tolerate line that you used this morning.
Right. And it, you know, and back then it was like, I didn't think twice about it. I just thought this is the way to do it. Right. But again, the golf industry has not been competitive with other industries for decades for salaries, as Jonathan has brought up. And I think that's the challenge we have now, because, you know, once we got into the last couple of seasons of work from home situation, which a lot of my clients and their companies are doing, and they're continuing to do, which then has just brought a 20 to 30% increase in play to the clubs. You know, I think Rob Gick said it best last season. I was spending some time with him, and it was like a Wednesday morning, and I said to Rob, I said, "How are things going?" He said, "Every day is Saturday now," because, you know, a lot of the members are at home. They're not having that transportation, you know, of 2 to 4 hours back and forth to the city, and they have an extra 2 to 3 hours a day that they used to be on a train or in a car that they can now come to the golf course. And all that translates into, you know, you're working your staff harder. And as a head professional, you're probably doing things that you've never had to do before, which I assume you're going to have to continue doing, simply because there's just not enough workforce out there right now for us.
Thanks, John. Just again, sorry for the digression there, but it was just it was a nice anecdote, and I wanted to share it with everyone. So, Jonathan, sorry to
All
derail you
good.
there,
Yeah.
but let's keep on. Let's keep going.
Yeah, important. And we're going to get to all this and just the shape, the shift in the social dynamics of what's going on. And obviously, we have effective teams when people are passionate about what they do, and we hope to attract those. And obviously, the 80 of us on here are extremely passionate about golf, and we just hope we can influence more people into our industry that share that same passion. When, you know, sun up to sundown really doesn't matter. They just want to be around it, live and breathe golf all day, every day. So cost of universities, as you can imagine, are incredibly high. When we match the cost of university with what the starting salaries for an assistant professional that is just entering the workforce, this is something that not only they are aware of, but their parents are aware of it too. They're investing a lot of money in a career, and the adage of, oh, pay your dues, and then you will ultimately be somewhere as a head professional. This is your goal, and you will make it, but it's going to take you maybe 10 years. You know, if you can graduate and earn 6 figures in another industry, you probably look that way. So I know, Andy, you brought up a great point about the university programs and the affiliates and the associates, and breaking them into 3 different segments. And why that is true, like it has been segmented, but ultimately, I really believe this is one of the biggest problems we have. You know, if you are a parent, we always ask the question, or we've asked the question, would you advise your your son or daughter to become a PGA professional, and would you invest $200,000 for them to do so? And knowing what their starting salary would be the first couple of years out of college, you know, you would think twice about it. So this is one of our biggest barriers to attracting individuals into the industry. Now, with the pandemic, when we're starting to see actually enrollment starting to increase in our PGM schools, because our wages are increasing, and that story is getting out there to students in high school, that yes, your first year out of college, as you're learning right now, and those that are posting on the job board, that you easily could, as a first assistant professional, get towards a 6-figure range within the metropolitan section. So with that, the total cost for dues has stayed the same for PGA of America the past 10 years. It's $3,900. It actually will probably decrease in the near future. That's because of just the ability to conduct a virtual remote learning to complete your levels. Now, Jeff made a wonderful point before about, so you might have the capital, you might have the money to pay, but ultimately, you're still not getting the talent to your facility. So it goes a little bit further than that. So what else are people looking for? When we survey those that are exiting the industry, and the ones that we're obviously concerned about everyone exiting the industry, but when we ask those that have become assistant professionals that ultimately leave within the first 5 years of the profession, why they leave, The reasons are compensation, right? Work-life balance. We're going to hear that a lot. We already know about it. The lack of growth opportunity and declining respect for the profession. Now, the third bullet point is probably the most important bullet point, especially for millennials and Generation Z. If they have a clear roadmap and they feel that they will be elevated in their careers, they will be retained in their current position in their current industry. If they feel there is zero lack of growth opportunity, if they're just going through the motions, if they're just putting the carts away at the end of the night, and it's their third year, and they don't think that they're going to make it into the first assistant position or head professional position, they're going to leave. So having a clear growth or sitting down with your staff and showing them how they will grow within your facility is incredibly important. So what can you do? What are some clubs doing? Because certainly the industries outside of golf are offering all this and then some. There should be some kind of student loan repayment at your club. It certainly is easy to have that conversation. You can contribute to their 401k. You can give them access to things like health and wellness, a stipend for gym memberships, signing bonuses. I know, remember last year, there's like a big, we're offering a signing bonus. This is crazy. Well, that quickly has become customary. And almost expected, honestly. So signing bonus for those that are hired to entice them. Are you paying for their professional development, their tournament expenses? We hear it all the time. What is their work-life balance? Do they have ability to earn extra time off? Do you have it in your staff so they can take a half a weekend day off to be with their family? They want to go to a concert on a Sunday night. Is that okay? Obviously not in the middle of a member guest, but is that okay, right? These are things that are important. It's not, sometimes it's just not dollars and cents. It is a quality of life. And I think we're all experiencing with the pandemic. John, to your point before, like every day is Saturday. Yeah, like we're living it too. We don't want to feel it. We have to be sure that our staff isn't feeling like every day is Saturday, or they're going to get burnt out and we're not going to be able to retain them. For you and your clubs, your employees are able to make a $5,200, a little bit more contribution to pay off student debt. This does go a long way. This is something that you might not be advertising in your employment bulletins, but paying off student debt is obviously near and dear to those that have it. And it certainly can attract people to your facility.
Hey, Jonathan, before we move on, I think Tim Garvin, if we can get him, if he's willing to share, I think he has sort of an employee benefit incentive program that might be of interest to some people.
Awesome.
Tim, would you mind?
No, I'm here. Thanks, guys. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah. First of all, just to the PG, I'll be blunt and quick. As a second generation golf professional, my father used to hire people because they loved the game of golf. Said it was the greatest office in the world to be outside and play golf, and converted people that were looking at other businesses to become golf professionals without the PGM. The PGM, in my experience, the interns have learned more working from a PGA professional than they have in school. And they've been promised something that is possibly unattainable. And there needs to be an engagement there, just like other businesses. Why are 20-somethings and 30-somethings going to work for Google and Microsoft? It's because of the environment that the employer provides, and the retention comes from that feeling. Now, you can pay anybody as much as you want. We're competitive. But if the employee doesn't feel like they're appreciated, they're going to look for another job. We've tried to create this kind of concept of family. And everybody says, well, you're in the Hamptons, it's easy. It's not that easy. We started this 3 or 4 years ago. And what it is that it's really an incentive program where we do things that large corporations do, like Employee of the Month, Employee of the Year. And we have a financial package backed up to support those things, to make people feel good about themselves. Incentives in large businesses go a long way because people feel like they're part of a family. They feel like they're respected. They get the time off that they need, other than it doesn't interfere with anything else. We do a member raffle every year, which pays for all of our PGA members and associates to play in anything, as well as give them money for education and to promote themselves. And then I am active. If they say, look, I want to expand my horizons, I'm active in trying to move them to positions in other parts of the country that they feel comfortable with. Now, that said, that program has paid us back very well. And the reason for that is basically word of mouth. So people, I get resumes unsolicited because people want to come to work in that environment. And we don't have a staffing problem. We have a staffing problem in the dining room, which, is an issue because the empowerment in the last couple of years has gone from the employer to the employee. And the employee can decide what they want to be paid, because you can't lose them in season. They want to raise, they want to look at other opportunities. If you're not treating the employees well as a family with incentives, then if a job comes up for $2 more down the street, they're leaving. So you have to be able to retain them, and you have to be able to get the word out that your facility is the best place to work in the best environment. And when the numbers come up, people are really going to think about that. Employees are going to think about leaving, and it may be a little bit of an increase, but when they interview and they look at maybe the environment they're switching to, they're going to feel a lot more comfortable staying where they are than actually leaving. And we've done a great job of that with helping people with personal issues, helping people with incentive programs, recognizing them through parties. It doesn't really cost a lot of money, but it makes them feel like they're part of our community at the club. And when they feel comfortable, they don't want to leave. And that helps us a lot, has helped us a lot in the last 3 or 4 years. Originally when I went to the board to try to put an incentive package together, he said, well, we already have the PGA thing. And, I said, well, that doesn't really help, the outside operation guy, who loves the game of golf. But, how do we incentivize them? I said, maybe we push the incentives to the hourly pay outside, and then we just divide that out so everybody can gauge what they have. Obviously, we have 401ks for salaried people. We do a lot of incentives like, we put people out to play golf with good young kids that are good golfers that may work outside, so that they can meet members, that work in the city. We use that as an advancement to say, you're meeting the wealthiest people in New York City. They're going to help you stay with us. And that's also an incentive. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Jeff.
You, Tim. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks, Tim. You kind of brought up a thought that I have been talking to a lot of professionals over the winter and kind of restructuring their contracts with the clubs. It has to go along with retention bonuses. So for those that have contracts with your current facilities, I hope that you can try to figure out a way how to have a retention bonus. So if you are with the club for the next 5 years, there's something in there for you, like an extra 25, 50,000, and for 10 years, that's built into your contract. And the same should be true for all your staff. Is there a retention bonus for your staff that's, a 2-3 year employee, or how many milestones till they reach that bonus that just kind of holds them just a little bit longer to your facility. So you don't have to go through the process of putting it on the job board and continually search for talent every year, because as you know, it is exhausting. So look into not only referral bonuses for your staff, or your staff to refer other people, but a retention bonus, not only for you, but for your staff as well. This is something that if you've talked to me at any length of the past 3 years, I really believe that work-life balance is attributed to other things. It's obviously compensation, it's obviously payroll. But if I told you that I could tell you exactly which of our facilities are undercompensated and they're going to be stressed out and they don't have the adequate resources, and come August, you're wishing for it to snow again, and then it feels like the course across the street is just great. They're refreshed, they're enjoying their time at the golf course, they're enjoying their job, they're loving life. Every day does not feel like Saturday. It has to do with a very simple metric. If you can take one thing out of today, I hope that you institute this at your club. I hope that you have this conversation with your employers and you go through your balance sheets and figure out exactly how to, what your payroll per round is. We've had a ton of success just with this metric alone, and educating employers how your facility has stacked up over the years with COVID, and then how you compare to the facilities maybe that your employers or your committees or your club feels that is their competition. So it's an incredibly simple metric. The solution is you take your golf operations payroll, do not include the highest ranking PGA member's salary in that number, because that person is supposed to lead the service team. So it's your golf operations payroll, not including the head professional, and you divide that by your number of rounds of golf. That gives you $1 per round. What we saw with the pandemic in 2019, I'll just look at the top 25 in the middle. For private clubs in the Metropolitan section is 25.7, and the middle was $16.5 in service staff per round of golf. Now, what happened in 2021? Everything went down. And it might not seem a lot, but if you're doing 30,000 rounds and you go down $3 per round, that's $90,000 you are short in your payroll budget. And obviously your membership, or if you're a private club, but they are going to see a lacking in service. And if you're trying to produce the same level of service as you were in 2019, you were exhausting yourself and you were exhausting your staff. And this, at my core, I believe is the absolute issue that we're experiencing. And this is the solution to the problem. If we can kind of come to terms with our $1 per round numbers, we can provide the same level of service that we were before the pandemic, and then also without exhausting our most valuable resources, which is our human capital. Now, before I mention that I can show you on a chart who will be burnt out, I can't tell you whose names is who, because that's going to be confidential here. But if you look at the 2019 on the far right column, it's the third one from the right, payroll per round. This is just a cross section of some private clubs in the metropolitan area. Now, if I look from the third one down to 16.2, that club is in direct competition with the one that's at 22.5. They are across the street from one another. But the professional staff at the club, the third one down, is not fighting a fair fight. They have to work almost 40% harder to produce the same level of service as the club across the street. But the members of the club at the 16.2 expect the same level of service. So this is important for you to know exactly what you're offering. And then if we look across from left to right, this is where we start to see burnout. So from the clubs in 2019, if you look in the far right column to 2021, I can tell you right now, of those clubs that are in red on the right column, 3 of those professionals resigned from their position last year. You know, we visibly can tell on a chart if you're going to experience burnout and if you're likely to resign from your position. So you want to be really well aware of what your payroll per round numbers are and have to communicate that with your staff. So in 2022, what you're going to do is you're going to budget accordingly. You're going to figure out what your payroll per round was in 2021, and then forecast where your rounds of golf will be for 2022, and then try to get your payroll numbers in excess per round of where they were in 2021, just to make sure you have the adequate staffing needs. Again, if you can take one thing away from today, both Jeff and I are more than happy to kind of go in more detail with you outside of this educational seminar. But we as an industry must grasp this concept and be able to explain this with employers. It's very easy to understand. Your payroll per round numbers are vitally important to having what you want is a great work-life balance and flexibility in your scheduling for you and your staff.
And I think Jonathan, I mean, I think it's evident that, you know, I think in most cases, this is due to the denominator in the equation increasing, as we all know that it did, number of rounds of golf, right, over the last 3 years, and payroll either staying the same or potentially increasing, but not at the same rate as the denominator. And it's just the simplicity of it and the beauty of it are the number of ways that we can utilize it, either to as sort of a negotiating tool to get more budget, to increase budget, potentially as an incentive. You know, hey, when rounds go up and our staff does what they do, or you know, as we all know, what they did over the last 2 years, well, maybe there's some potential bonusing and incentives there to maintain the ratio at the level that the club and the members expect it to be at. So this is something that in a revamped section level compensation survey that we intend moving forward to ask you, all the head professionals and directors of golf on the call, because we believe that this will be yet another, you know, important piece of information to sort of equip you with as you negotiate not only for yourself, but for sort of the totality of your staff moving forward. So thanks, Jonathan. And
yeah.
Just really excited about, you know, another metric that hopefully can help, you know, all of us as we, you know, try to either add staff or try to get our existing staff a little bit more.
Yep. Thanks. And again, if you have any questions about this, it's certainly important. What I mean, just going to say one last thing, an observation here. What I was just looking at this, the club right in the middle, maybe 6 or 7 from the top on the 2019 payroll per round. You see it in bright green, it's 40.2. And what happened, their payroll stayed, the payroll increased a little bit year over year, but their payroll per round went from 40.2 to 31.7. If they're doing 20,000 rounds, you know, I'll round up here. Let's say it's $9 per round. They're short of where they were in 2019. They're doing 20,000 rounds. They're $180,000 short of where they need to be for the same service levels. So that is a significant problem. And that's exactly why we are hearing from our PGA members that everyone is exhausted because the service levels are just not where they need to be. And so just again, need to be aware of it and more than happy to go through it. Tim, you did an amazing job mentioning something we had in our slides about how to actually attract talent without even putting the job up there in the job board, and it's to kind of create that word of mouth in your referral in your local community. And what I'm hearing from what you were saying is it's all about culture. You know, does your staff, are they aware of the culture? Is the local community aware of the culture? Would someone drop everything they have to be a part of your team? And again, what do they gain from it? So great culture obviously retains staff. It attracts talent. It just makes everyone in a better place. They're happy in their work, happier in their work environment. Obviously, when we have negative culture, it completely affects our club. When we have employees leave the club and they are not in the right frame of mind, they're unhappy. That could have massive effects with attracting talent in the near future. I'm going to share something right now. I'm going to kind of zip through these slides a little bit, and just because I want to get through something about how to actually post a job before I turn it over to Tyler. We see over and over again on the job board that something what would be a very classic posting, which is the position description, the key responsibilities, and then the compensation. It's like, what is the employee going to do for me? And it actually has to switch immediately. The job postings need to be, what are we going to do for you? How are we going to elevate your career to where you want to go? How are we going to take care of you compensation-wise, benefit-wise? What is our culture? How will you be joining our team? Who is your head professional? Who are the other staff that you'll be working with, right? So not the traditional way of what the employee will do for the employer, but more so what the employer is going to be doing for the employee. So when you look at your job postings, if you're not having success with it, you probably need to reshape the framework on it. I'm going to share a very good one that I just received from Canubrook and Reed Lansinger. One of Reed's assistants just went on to a head professional position. It's a celebration, a wonderful opportunity, but now they have a void to fill, like many of us in the section here. So this is their job bulletin, just a little bit about the position, the compensation, the days of the week, what you can expect right out in front, some very good imagery, a little bit about the team, the facility itself, the activity, number of rounds. On the left side is the benefits, very comparable with what you can expect in our industry. Additional benefits, why you would come to Canubrook. But this is something, as I'm scrolling down, is obviously a little bit different than we traditionally see on our job board. It gives you a little bit more about what the scope of the position is, but then we really get into the culture part of the position. This is all about Reed. It's humanizing him, his family, a wife, a child. There's a video here that you can click on to learn a little bit more about him, his career progression, and how he takes an interest in his staff. Some of Reed's career achievements, more pictures of the facility. Obviously, as you might have seen in the benefits package, it includes a membership to the facility's gym, and then where their staff went. You know, former assistants there. You have Pat Fillion, who went to GM Director of Golf. Eli Reed, who's the one who accepted a head professional position at Trenton Country Club, and John Mascari, who went on to Alpine. And then Are You Next? Like, this is something that would resonate to an assistant professional looking for a position. And then followed up by a little bit. Yep, gotcha.
Yeah, sorry, no, before you finish up, but it's, you know, again, this to me is a perfect example of kind of lengths that we haven't had to go to historically in order to attract people. But, you know, and it seems like a simple thing, but wow, it's like, okay, this is maybe an example of things that we have to start thinking about. The other thing that jumps out to me is, and if it was there, I missed it, but unlike most of the traditional postings that we see, I don't remember seeing on this document like a punch list of duties, right? It was like, it was all, why come here? What can we give to you? What's the, you know, a little bit like what Tim Garvin was describing, like, this is the environment that you're coming to. These are the benefits of coming to work here, not like sort of leading out with, you know, shop time, junior golf, you know, the tournament administration. It's like, and maybe a small thing, but, you know, if it's clearly in your travels, you see that it's working for some.
Yeah, great point, Jeff. It certainly has. Employers are doing whatever they can to attract talent, and to your point, it has completely switched to what can we do and what can we offer. Here's what we're offering you as an employer, instead of here's what we expect you to give us and we'll pay you for it. That has completely changed. So let me see if I can share here. I'm having a little.
Hey, Jeff, Tim had a question in the queue there about the separation on the call for professionals and paying positions, incentives, and the facility paying those fees. Tim, do you want to explain what you were asking there?
Yeah, thanks. That's what I was going to say. It seems like maybe is the professional themselves sort of out of pocket for those programs versus the club? Is that kind of where you were going, Tim?
Well, yeah, what I think is that, you know, again, going back to the transfer of power between, employers and employees. The employee asks a lot of questions. The employee wants to know what they get, what kind of environment they're coming into. But for the most part, a lot of us at private clubs have a board, and the concept is to convince the board, which can be older members, to kind of bend over backwards to get this. And Jonathan, kind of put it pretty simply in the thing from Canoebrook is we're trying to attract people, and we need to tell them what we can bring to them. And a lot of the older board members would say, well, you know what, they got a job. I go, well, that's not good enough anymore. You can't do that. So if you have a financial backing of a club, my club pays all of my employees. It's kind of very different for someone that pays the employees as a PGA professional, because what they're doing is like maybe Craig Thomas pays his first and second assistant out of his salary. I don't know those things, but but to get the club on board, to increase those things and help the PGA professional that is actually paying the employees is huge. And again, a small incentive package provided by the club is enormous. You can make $5,000 go a really, really long way. And it could be medals, or it could be, just anything to make them feel part of the team. So if you do, pay your own employees, it would be good to kind of go out and, reach out to the larger income, which is the club, to say, look, we're at crisis right now.
And Tim,
we've got.
The first thing that comes to mind for me is again, that's where the dollars per round of golf operator golf service budget could help, right? If irrespective of who's paying, but if the golf professional is paying some staff and the club is paying some staff, the aggregation of all that per round, if it is deficient to where the club thinks it should be, then maybe that head golf professional / director of golf needs to be paid more by the club so that they can in turn pay more to those employees. And then at the end of the day, that number goes up, kind of thing, right? So again, that could be a negotiating tool to that professional who has some overhead themselves to say, look, you're not giving me enough to attract or to have better incentives or whatever it might be. So it's kind of it's the whole pie, as Jonathan always likes to say. It's how we slice up the pie.
Right. And Jonathan brings up a good point about burnout. The burnout is based on, I feel, the head pro or the director of golf trying to make up for the lack of the staff, and the quality of the staff to improve their job and create levels of service. And then all of a sudden they look at it like they have no family life because I worked 80 hours this week and I'm done. I can't do it anymore. So you've got to get the clubs on board. You've got to get the overall facilities on board, that this is a real problem. And you've got to say, look, if you want me to keep this level of service up, this is what I need. And it's not going to cost a fortune, but, incentive program is a very, very inexpensive way to retain and keep employees and to, do things. I mean, Craig's done great job with his staff, and, everybody wants to work for Craig. So do I. No, maybe not. But these are the kinds of things. This is a club-wide or facility-wide issue, and it needs to go out to everybody, and they need to buy into the concept of increased pay, workload, burnout, and incentives.
To your point, Tim, and you're spot on. I mean, I think this is clearly one of the most important issues that have been and will continue to face for the foreseeable future. From a section level, I think we think about things like our pro president event, and even creating different opportunities where our association has the chance to speak to, Jonathan mentioned it before, right? Whenever, as we've gone into these dozen or more head pro transitions, we're making it a point to talk about work life and about burnout and about, trying to slowly sort of chip away at this cultural foundation that's been built up for over 100 years, which obviously isn't going to happen overnight, but we rest incredibly aware of the need to work at it. And then just anecdotally, I happened to attend the MGA's annual meeting at the beginning of December, and Seth Waugh was the featured, guest speaker for about 30 or 45 minutes of their meeting. Now, he was there probably for a certain purpose, to talk about big picture industry things, but as he should, he took the opportunity among that room of the people that you described, these important leaders within the clubs throughout the Met area, to talk about just this, about work-life balance, the need for a changing culture for the golf profession, and the individuals who serve the game. And I was lucky enough to, have a few conversations with people that I know as the dinner went on at the end of the evening, and there were some eyebrows raised. So, again, this isn't going to change overnight. We're not going to walk into our jobs in March and April and all of a sudden there's this new culture. But I was so encouraged and impressed by our CEO that he took that opportunity in the right audience here in the MGA to discuss it. So I guess what I'm saying is just know that everybody is well aware and doing everything, thinking in these terms and doing everything we can to, as I said, chip away at that foundation.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Just one add, every president that's walked away from the pro president has always come back, and said, I never knew that. I never realized that about you guys. And in this changing environment, maybe it would be a good way to expand to an event where, the pro plays with 3 board members, maybe a pro-am somewhere, something like that, to, talk about these things next year. When I asked the president or my members to go play with me, they love that. And they come back totally engulfed with a new concept of what I do. And I think it would be, prudent to maybe expand that information to owners of facilities and club members. That's just my opinion.
Hey, Jonathan, I think you have some really key slides there about, what the work environment is and so forth. And it might be a good idea is if you could put together a presentation that we could offer to the directors of golf and head professionals, people like Tim that go to their boards, so they have some ammunition to understand. I know, like, I'm in the city a lot, and with my clients who are, attorneys and partners at law firms and so forth, they're all very familiar with this workplace situation. Everybody that I interact with knows that it is definitely an employee-driven, as Tim mentioned, it's an employee-driven environment now. They have to do things. I know this one particular law firm, I have 4 or 5 attorneys who are all partners, and they said that the associates are dictating the terms of how we're going to do this going forward with, work-life balance, how many hours we want to be in the city, how many hours I want to work from home, what other things that you can do for me. So if we could take part of your presentation, meaning you, not me, and offer it up to every one of our golf professionals that has to deal with the board, because I think, Rob Gick told me he's playing 25 to 30% more people, but with the same salary structure, with the same staffing. And that just, if you put that in those terms to a board member who has to operate his or her own company, they certainly need to understand that. And I think that's where the big thing is, the budgets aren't increasing nearly as much as the play and the services, because what Rob was saying is like every member expects the same level of service, even though we're playing 25 to 30% more people.
Yeah, John, absolutely. Great point. We do have something very similar And we can follow up after this seminar with a PDF file that I would give to professionals for them to go.
Yeah,
through
so if
theirs.
like any of you are interested, please contact Jeff and Jonathan, because they, the section office is working very hard behind the scenes, and they work with us on the board to try to come up with, as Jeff mentioned, we don't have any answers, but we can have solutions. And I think this is a very ever-changing environment. It's going to continue to change throughout the spring and summer. And I just think this is the life we live right now. And I don't see, as Jeff mentioned, I don't see it changing for the next few seasons. I think this is something we're going to be dealing with for a while.
Well, and just since we're on the subject, John, and I see Andy's question about, efforts to educate employers. I mean, Andy, I don't know if you want to jump on and speak, but I think to your point, that's something that is a top priority right now, is trying to unlock the best way or ways to do those things. And just in terms of the section and what we're doing, again, along with, things that John, like the Canoe Brook example, and ways we have to rethink a job posting, for example. We, as from a section perspective, clearly it isn't good enough anymore for us to simply, take your job listing, put it onto our website, which, I use the concept of like a closed loop. We're only promoting it to the closed loop of people who know to come and look and seek it out to, from us. Clearly, people do a lot with things like LinkedIn these days. And so we've just created a LinkedIn page for the section where we're going to try to either link to or distribute the job postings that are on our website, hopefully to a larger audience, right? I've recently learned about some, and some of these things may be less for the skilled workforce of golf professionals. But then again, I think, where does that entry-level assistant really come from? As Tim described earlier, it's the young person who grew up playing golf and loves the game and wants to get in the business. It's your outside ops person who you think, what, he or she's ready to come and work in the shop and learn the ropes a little bit. So things like local job fairs where, we might go out and talk to people who are looking for jobs about the golf business. Maybe a little bit more specific, we have our PGA Hope program, and we over the years have tried to create a program that we call VetWorks, which is an opportunity for the men and women who have come through the Hope program who would like to work outside, to try to connect them with people who are looking to hire. We've just dusted off some databases that we've had for both high school golf programs in the area, as well as college golf programs, to try to talk to them. Colleges that have sport management curriculum, who might have students who want to do internships or look into golf. And then most recently, our board yesterday agreed to the concept of the section launching a career fair specific to the golf industry in our area. So rather than just a general career fair, we're going to try to go out there. We're going to try to lock arms with the Club Managers Association, as well the Golf Course Superintendents Association. They've just done this in New Jersey relatively successfully. I know Jonathan was involved, but to try to have clubs come out for hopefully no fee, and if we do have to charge a fee, we hope it to be very, very nominal. The idea here is not a revenue grab, but a service to our golf community, to try to get people who might be interested in golf to come out, talk to a golf professional, a club manager, a golf course superintendent, and see what we can do. Right? I know that in New Jersey, somewhere between 10 and 20 people were hired that day. So as far as I'm concerned, I would, if we were able to do that, I would consider it a success. I mean, it doesn't sound large scale, but we kind of have to start somewhere. So those are just a handful of the things that we're thinking about, that we're doing, differently, and trying to kind of, as I've said, turn over every stone to try to help. So sorry for the diatribe there. It just felt like we were kind of headed that way with, what's the section doing? And that was sort of just a handful of things that we're. Craig, did you put a hand up, or up then down? Okay. Jonathan, did you want to kind of turn it to Tyler at this point?
Yeah, I think that'd be great, Jeff. And well said.
Awesome. Well, I'll give a quick little better introduction now that I'm in a stable situation and not driving on the road. So for some of you that don't know me, my entrance into the golf industry actually was outside services. I was a backroom staff member when I was 15, and I realized quickly that wasn't the right area of golf for me. So I ended up at the maintenance shed, and had a pretty, very lucky career. I was a golf course superintendent in Baltimore for 6 years. Had some pit stops at some pretty good tracks: Oakmont, Marion, Muirfield Village, and Southern Hills. And kind of like the evolution of myself was really in workforce development. So when I was a superintendent, probably like, many of your facilities, even with whether it was in the golf shop or food and beverage, finding good staff was a major issue. I mean, there's so many good conversations here today for me to listen to. Kind of excites me, but I had to really build from within. I wasn't in a situation to really pool assistants. One, the club wasn't paying competitively well against the industry standard. And so I had to really understand how to recruit within my community. And so over the course of 6 years, I built out a pretty robust apprenticeship program, but it kind of expanded more into learning how to make connections with different audiences, whether that be veterans, women, minorities, high schools, trade schools, really working with hand in hand with the Department of Labor. And so that's how I essentially, I guess you could say, created this vision of a consulting business, was to help clubs do that. Because I found, and I still find it today, the biggest issue I think from a recruitment standpoint is awareness. People just don't know what the career pathways look like, nor do they understand where to go. And on the flip side, I think the employers don't know where to make those connections, or maybe just don't have the time to make those connections. There's so many good points about work-life balance, and things have shifted so dramatically over the last 2 years. Like how much more can you actually do that you've got enough on your plate? And so, I know Jonathan and Jeff had kind of asked me just to talk maybe more specifically about recruiting. But one of the things that I find consistent, I was at a top 5 facility this morning in Philadelphia, talking about establishing a central coordinator at your facility that does recruitment. Many clubs say to me right now, is it worth spending the money having not an HR person, somebody that's specifically a recruitment individual? And I see more and more need for that at a variety of facilities, not just the top 5 clubs. I see that at public facilities, municipalities. And the reason is because the hiring managers are getting pulled in so many different directions. Again, whether it's the superintendent, the golf shop, the golf professional, general manager. And so they're losing candidates based on the fact they're not focused on that recruitment and hiring process. Sourcing candidates, it's a full-time job. So my business, we do search and placement, and we do consulting and kind of what we're talking about, making those connections. But the sourcing of candidates takes so much time because you've got to allot, the ability to connect with individuals immediately, not a week later. If you don't have a touch point on a candidate within 6 to 12 hours, it's a good chance you're going to lose them because they're going to find another opportunity, because it's endless right now. You've got to have somebody that can coordinate that interview process and keep it moving smoothly. So again, you don't lose candidates. And that's, I know, very tactical. And maybe for some people, they say, well, that's not realistic. But again, delegating time to somebody at the facility, I think from a recruitment standpoint, is much needed. Maybe it's not hiring a new position, but appointing an assistant, somebody to try to help do that. And again, that leads back to the conversation of your boards need to be educated, almost to beating a dead horse, the need for it. And it's a changing priorities right now, but you can't meet your business goals without talent. There's just no possible way. From a recruitment side of things, like where do we actually find people from? I will tell you that it seems to me that if clubs don't have the first point is good marketing material and why somebody should work there, which was already touched upon, it's hard to convince somebody to change careers if you can't show them a vision, to grow within your facility, no matter what level they're at, whether that's an assistant level or it's entry level. I think that a club has to really rethink what success looks like and what a good employee is, like in defining that. And that might seem very pie in the sky, but a lot of facilities don't really know how to judge what does a good candidate look like. But what are the characteristics that they need? And do we have some of those key performers on staff that we could maybe potentially clone and put that in a job advertisement? You're trying to connect to people. I find right now you're hiring more on personality and managing personality than you are skills. Because the skill sets that are coming into this industry are not the same as they were 5-10 years ago. So I think another kind of like low-hanging fruit things that clubs should be doing is making sure their digital communication, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever flavor, that you're highlighting what a day in the life looks like. That job posting from Canubrook was great, but that's only one touch point. Digital communication can really help, broaden your scope of reach, to make people aware of what that job looks like. So if you're not using social media, you're behind the 8 ball right now, in my estimation, comparison to other local restaurants, hospitality, whatever. Advertisement in general. Whoever spends the most money in marketing is going to win. And it's no different in employment. If you can market positions using Twitter ads, Facebook ads, it's money well spent, because you're hitting a much broader audience than you'll ever get from an Indeed job posting, maybe even some industry job boards. So I just think if you're not doing some of those key little things, those are small, quick wins. It doesn't take a whole lot of time investment to start telling your story and getting your marketing correct. Invest small amounts of money on some of that advertisement. From where do we find people? Again, whether that's from golf course maintenance or golf shop, I think Jeff or somebody here hit it on the head that you've got to understand, like, trace back to how you got into the industry. For me, as I played golf coming up, and I played golf in high school. And so connect with high school golf coaches, connect with other facilities locally, kind of a shared system, a joint effort. I think maybe looking at some of those local career centers as a good starting point. We network with veterans. I kind of said women, immigration agencies. You got to have the full playbook right now, because it's not going to come from one direct market. It's got to be kind of a little bit of everything.
Hey, Tyler,
And
if I can just interrupt you real quick, I think the working with career centers is probably something a little bit new to this group. And can you just talk about like how you go about engaging a career center that's in the local community? Because that certainly could be a good resource. Not so much for the assistant professionals that need acquired golf related skills, but most likely those that may be working in the back room or outside golf operations where skills can be trained, but they're not asked to give, golf lessons or play with the membership.
Yeah, good point of making sure to separate the two between assistant search and, general labor. But if you go into Google and literally put in your local career center, in your county, you'll come to a contact point or a website. And my engagement, is usually through an email communication. There's usually a point person or administration person. And just to kind of connect with them to understand what local resources are available. Typically, they offer things like opportunity to market a job posting, which is free. They typically offer an opportunity to host a job fair, whether virtually or in person. Typically, they have a job board that has people that are actively looking. That doesn't mean they're unemployed or they're poor, bad employees. It's just that it's a resource for job seekers to look for general employment. right? So I think those career centers are a great starting point, if I'm a club, looking for more of those entry level type positions. I do think that they're best, those individuals are best used to connect you to a trade school, a high school, a veteran, minority, because they're engaged with job seekers every single day. So I find that it's more of a referral system than anything. And I think those career centers are, nice one-stop shops. They're not going to solve all your problems and all your people needs, but it's a relationship I would be investing into and keeping up with periodically. Because if they know about you and the opportunities you have, you got to think about clubs as a whole. You've got hospitality, maintenance, HVAC. It's a great resource for clubs to tap into. Does that make sense, Jonathan?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Tyler.
I wanted to interject too, because I was, as you were speaking, I wanted to make sure we separated. And I'm glad you guys did the sort of the separate conversations of general labor versus, like in our world, assistants and golf professionals. Although I do believe it's separate, that there is some potential overlap, and we kind of touched on this before. It's like, where do future golf professionals come from? Is potentially someone that you found by one of these non-traditional means, you developed and trained and showed them sort of the path to becoming a golf professional. I wanted to also kind of just highlight an individual. I see Jerry Chilkowski. Hi, Jerry, on the call here. Jerry is an interesting example to me of how when we think about recruiting and mentoring, we have to, it's all of our jobs, ladies and gentlemen, to always be recruiting potential future PGA professionals all the time, whether that's the more traditional young person who you found in non-traditional means and they developed on your staff and ultimately became a golf professional, or someone like Jerry, who now Jerry's a very young 62 years of age. Jerry has been a proud PGA professional for 4 years. Now, oh, by the way, Jerry's also a certified professional in that short amount of time. But golf was a second career for Jerry. But I think he's just a great example of you never know if that retired, maybe fireman or policeman who was a golfer, is a golfer, and wants to join our ranks. So. Again, those are a little less common and non-traditional, but just I keep seeing Jerry's face on my screen and I wanted to use him as an example. But the other point I wanted to make was, at our board level and on our assistants professional committees, we talk about the concept of mentorship, right? And historically, that's always meant, let's create programs for head pros to mentor Class A assistants on how to be better, how to improve, how to develop, how to become head golf professionals, directors of golf. That's fine, but I think I would just challenge all of us to rethink that a little bit, to both head professionals and assistant professionals mentoring people who don't even know they want to be golf professionals yet. Let's say it that way, right? They don't even realize maybe that this is a potential career path. And sort of your tutelage could be, could ignite that spark and that fire to lead them into our ranks. So just a couple of thoughts as Tyler and Jonathan, you guys were speaking there. But I think, again, the idea of recruiting, again, we've got multiple things going on, general labor versus golf professionals, but just want to encourage everyone to remember it's all of our job to be recruiting golf professionals all the time.
It's a great point. I mean, and again, this conversation could last 3 hours all day and all night. But I find interacting with assistant managers, whether it's, the golf shop ops or grounds, they need to feel purpose. And I think they also are looking for the opportunity to be mentors for those underneath them. And so I think it's a great point, Jeff, to really sort of empower those people, even if they don't know every little single skill set of being a high-end quality PGA professional, they can still be leaders at that level. And that's really what I see a lot of clubs need, is just more leadership, not just from the top, but all the way down to the ground level. So sorry to get off a little bit tangent there, but Jonathan, I know you and I've had some really good discussions. I'd like to bring you in to kind of just maybe refocus the conversation relative to this audience of some of our discussions and things that I could highlight.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the things that the group, obviously there's many good pieces here and there, is just, it all goes back to recruiting. What are some referral programs that you've seen clubs institute? I think we've talked about them a little bit, but if your club certainly doesn't have a referral program, how do you start that? And if you can elaborate a little more on that one, Tyler, that's great, because that certainly engages the whole staff to go out there and help the recruiting aspect instead of just the hiring manager, or in this case, the head golf professional.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the number one way to get good quality candidates is through referral systems. And so kind of how I would start that discussion, there's a financial component to it. There's the direct cash of a referral program. There also is those non-direct cash, could be discounts at the golf shop, food privileges, facility access. I mean, most golf facilities have, sporting event tickets that they have access to, maybe to a local sports team. Really looking at what assets could you offer to employees that are beyond just cash. Because it's always a difficult conversation, I think, for anybody to say, and how much money are we now going to spend in a referral system? But really the idea is to have your employees refer friends or others through their social connections. And you just never know who they'll connect with. But, a great program that I've seen, and I'll keep the facility nameless, but if an employee referred another individual, that person who referred would get a $250 bonus, right? If that individual that they hired stayed on for 90 days, they'd get another $250 bonus. If that individual stayed through the remainder of the season, they got another $250 bonus. And that person that they, brought on received, a reward for that as well. And so the metric that they showed me, this was pretty substantial. They spent roughly $45,000 on Indeed boosted ads for just general labor type positions. And they got 8 hires. They spent $15,000 in a referral system and had 22 hires. So in their first year of doing this, that program was very successful. And again, I think that's just kind of outside the box thinking, but obviously now they're looking at and saying, what are some additional things we could offer, to basically create our community and create our family within. And I think everybody on this call will take that differently and what they could institute. But if you're not using a referral program, there's some good data and evidence to say, I think it's worth a discussion. Obviously that's got to be at the, management level and potentially into the board level. But I mean, to get 22 hires off of $15,000, that's a pretty good ROI in my estimation, that are all still employed by the company.
Yeah, great point. I'm going to ask a question in a second here, but it's funny how we start seeing the issues with staffing that are in our mid-management or general labor that are starting to creep into the senior management and executive level. And I think that we're starting to see clubs are starting to be very cognizant of the applications for certain positions. They're starting to see that and hear through the grapevine that in the past, if you were to put out an opportunity for a head golf professional, you would get 100 resumes. Now they're starting to hear you'd be lucky if you got 10. And I think that's starting to scare a lot of employers. So again, it goes back to the point of now is the time to, try to negotiate a retention bonus, because a lot of times we're seeing general manager, superintendent, head golf professional get an offer. And it could be with an assistant professional, and now they're shopping that offer, right? They're going back to their original employer and saying, hey, I'm going to go here, not as a threat, but I've offered more compensation. It's better for myself and my family. And now their current employer is coming back and they're in a bidding war, and you kind of don't want to get into that. So I guess, Tyler, my question with that said, how do you kind of prevent, and you've really cut your teeth in the workforce development model. how do you prevent something like that? How do you really have happy, fulfilled employees in a development model so you don't get yourself into employees leaving and coming back and you having to get into a bidding war?
Well, there's no silver bullet, but here's some things that I've done that I think help. I think you've got to set up really from the get-go a pay for performance setup. And you talked about retention, and you could tie that into this, but essentially you're going to meet these metrics over the next 6 months, and we're going to take you from this pay to this next level. Here's what it looks like over the course of 2 years. Here's what it looks like over the course of 4 years. I really think setting a vision for any employee really eliminates a lot of guesswork. Like, where am I going to be at in a year from now? Am I going to be making 25 cents more an hour? Or am I going to be making $1,000 more, couple thousand? When you look at the cost of replacing one general labor employment, a good HR statistic, can be anywhere from $4,500 to $7,500 for one employee. So when you start thinking about that, it's like, man, we're wasting a lot of money when we could have probably offered a couple $1,000s more for somebody to stay in their current situation. So I think just from the direct compensation, that's one aspect. I do think some level of continued education, and that doesn't necessarily have to be a 2-year, 4-year, a master's degree. It could be Dale Carnegie training. It could be, I'm a partner with the Predictive Index, some level of self-awareness training, leadership development. That was a conversation I had with the employer this morning. Is we're not interested in necessarily a 2-year, 4-year degree, but I'd be interested in sending them to a sales school, leadership development. And so I think those are the things that people crave, right now, especially the younger generation are looking for, that additional level of schooling and education. But they don't want to leave the job, right? They'd rather stay in the job and do that. I think those are key things. A small little low hanging fruit, and I hit it a little bit earlier, is just engagement. They want to be a part of making decisions or being involved in budgeting processes. They want to meet vendors. They want to engage with industry professionals. So I have like an online coaching community with assistant managers so they can be educated by other industry experts. Sometimes it's the smallest things like that of being involved and exposed in the industry. And again, that's not the solution for everybody, but I do see that in workforce development is really trying to tie various resources beyond direct compensation as a way to entice people and motivate them to stay with their current company. I mean, and you and I've talked about this on a, that apprenticeship model. And let's just use it as a development system. 92% of employees that enroll in a formalized on-the-job training program like apprenticeship are retained in by their current employer. So some people have the thought of, man, if I invest in them, what if they leave? And it's like, no, what if you don't invest in them and they stay and they're not better employees? So it's a complex issue as a whole. Employers are dealing with a variety of different circumstances at a rapid pace. It's hard to make changes in an industry like this where there's a lot of layers at the individual club level, and then obviously even at a national association level. It's tough.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. I'm probably going to send it back to John and Jeff shortly, and then we can probably open it up for any questions that anyone on here has while we have some time. But just some things that are kind of going through my mind and some best practices when it comes to engaging your employees. We found that employees that are cross-trained in different areas of the club certainly are retained more. And I know it's crazy to think, but if you have some of your assistants or general labor kind of go out and work on the ground staff and vice versa, they have generally more a greater appreciation for all those that are stakeholders at the facility. And they're also able to better communicate the mission of each department. So you're not really siloed. That's really important. Sometimes differentiating skills will keep someone really engaged and prevent some burnout. We've had some higher level discussions about golf shops and does it really need to be open till 7-8 o'clock at night? What if the golf shop hours were agreed upon? It was a 5 p.m. close and you just had outside staff that that kind of frees up those to, go out and play with members, work on their game, do things that they want to do, be with their family. So just kind of looking at those little things could make a huge difference in the morale of your team. But yeah, Jeff, John, anything, any topics, want to open it up to the floor? Certainly want to engage any of those that are on the call. Should they have
If anybody
issues.
has any questions at this time, just unmute yourself over here and raise your hand, and we'll get you in here. I think this has really been a good interchange there. We appreciate having Tyler on. Tyler and Jonathan have a really good relationship that they've developed over the past couple of years. Both great resources. So if you have some needs there, reach out to Jonathan, reach out to Jeff. These guys are always working behind the scenes in order to help you. I think they have resources which a lot of you may not know about. So just even a phone call or an email. The sections office is always very accommodating. Every time we call them, we get what we want right away. So the section office is there to support you. Use it as a resource. If you'd like to use Tyler's resources, get hold of Jonathan. Jonathan will have stuff he can make available to you for your clubs. So when you go sit with the board members and so forth, they have a more accurate picture of what really is going on in your world. I think that's very important. I think Jonathan and Jeff are both available at some point if your board members want to talk to them. I mean, that's we can arrange that as well for you.
That's what I was going to say, John. Thanks. I was going to say, I sense that some people may have seen some slides today that they'd be interested in having. I'm sure, reach out. I'm sure we'd be happy to share those with you.
Yeah, and the HOPE program, which I have been involved in teaching for a number of years now, is a great resource. These men and women love golf. A lot of them, it's their first introduction to golf is through HOPE. They're just very invested in it. They're very appreciative. We're dealing with veterans, so we're dealing with people that can, take direction. They've all been in the military, so they understand, taking direction, and they understand supervision. There'd be a great resource if you need outside staff, or if you need, if you need assistance, even, there might be some talent in those pools, because there's a lot of the younger veterans come out to work with us. So again, Kelly has a wealth of information, as does Jeff, on that. For those that you considering that career at South Fork, I'd be careful, because you have to watch Philadelphia Eagle game film now that they're in the playoffs. So other than that, that's a benefit that Tim didn't talk about, and I can understand why, being from Pittsburgh. And I would go work for Craig at Metropolis, regardless of what Tim said.
That's
So thank you
unfair.
all.
That's unfair, John. It's unfair.
It's an unfair world, Tim. It's an unfair world. I'm from Pittsburgh, so we'll talk next Monday. But we have a lot of resources there. So if any of you have any questions at any time, raise your hand and please state them. I want to remind you tomorrow that we have Sam Wiley, Katie Wiedmer from Wingfoot, and Kirk Agori are going to talk about the show and what's going to go on there and how they're preparing for it. Next Tuesday, we have James Hong on a junior program, A Decade of Development. James and Jeff Smith, who is a top 50 instructor from Indiana, work closely together. So they have a really good program on taking your juniors from, the grade school through college. So we call it A Decade of Development there in the junior program. And then again, if you have any ideas of things that you'd like us as the education committee to put together for you, please reach out. Corey's our chairman. He's done a really good job about entertaining all the ideas. And we have a lot of time here. Again, you get MSRRs for those that you are hustling. I think June is our deadline. Is that correct, Jeff? So now's the time to get them in, and you get this MSRRs in, and you'll be good for another year. So if there are no other questions, I think we'll sign off. Anybody at all? Okay, thank you for attending. We appreciate it. And don't forget, your section's there to support you. So contact Jeff and all the people at the section office. Special thanks to Caitlin, Emily, and Noah, who put all the technical stuff together and make all this possible for us. Much appreciated. Take care.